Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. I am joined here tonight with Nick. I got like 7 words in. Joined here tonight with Nick Taylor from Found North Whiskey, among many other enterprises. And we're going to be drinking some awesome stuff. We've got batch 5 and batch 6 of Found North Whiskey tonight. So, Nick?
What's up, man? I'm so excited to be back. I haven't done an in-person live stream. I've done only virtual live streams since the last time I saw you,
which was not even for Found North. That was for your previous
crazy,
so,
crazy.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody earlier today about that, and I was exactly saying the same. I was like, man, he's put out years worth of whiskey since the last time I've even seen you.
That's crazy.
It was cool. I was like, he used to do this, and now he just has his own company, and he puts out this amazing whiskey, which sells for over $100 a bottle, and people just eat it up. Like it's awesome. Yeah,
it's nuts. It's totally nuts. No, I was excited to be back here. This is definitely where I did my first live stream ever.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. Yeah. Full circle.
That's
full
awesome.
Circle.
Yeah, that was back when we used to be up in the kitchen, which you guys, anybody who's watched this channel for any amount of time or found any of the older videos, you'll recognize the kitchen. We were kind of like just huddled over the counter. Now we're huddled down in a larger studio with a whole bunch of unused room.
Studio's pretty sweet.
Well, thank you very much. I was telling him I'm going to set up another little situation over there. Unfortunately, I don't have the leather chairs and the nice coffee table yet and the 10 different microphones, but we'll get there eventually. So, hey, everybody who's in the chat and people rolling in. This is great to see you here. Let us know in the chat what you guys are going to be drinking, but more importantly, so I have a question pinned at the top of the chat for you guys to ask any questions that you want. Because so far, and I'm hoping to jinx you a little bit because it'd be kind of funny, we have yet to stump Nick. Or at the very least, he has not let on that he doesn't know, and he's been very confident with his answer. So let's jump into our first pour, because it's always good to start a stream off. So let's go into bottle number 5, which is the one I have here. So I'm going to crack that real quick. And while I'm doing this, do you want to tell everybody like what this is? Well, actually, sorry, yeah.
Oh baby, that was pretty good.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
That was okay.
No, I'm.
We'll do a lot better on the next one.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm gonna let you do it though. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So this is.
What am I doing? I am a savage. Let me pour my guest his drink first. Oh, don't be like me.
Oh man.
So tell us about bottle number 5.
All right. So with this whiskey, we basically have always said that whiskey, particularly when you're blending whiskey, is very much the sort of push and pull of discovery and creativity. So in one hand, you're trying to make something, right? Mm-hmm. But whiskey doesn't cooperate the way you always want it to. Mm-hmm. And so when you're blending something and you're sitting there and you're going, all right, this flavor plus this flavor is gonna equal, some combination of the two. And sometimes it just goes in a completely different direction.
Okay.
And so there's a bit of just being humble about, okay, we thought this was going to work, it didn't work, or we tried this, we had no idea it was going to work, and holy cow. So with batch 5 sort of fell right into that category. We weren't even looking for wheat. Mm-hmm. My brother, who's really my co-founder and really is in charge of procurement. I mean, he goes out and hunts and finds all the really interesting barrels.
Nice.
He came back with this sample of an 8-year-old wheat in New Wood.
Okay. What kind of wood?
New American oak.
New American.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, totally just straight up New American oak. Yeah. I don't know. Straightforward.
That was I'm so used to you dealing with Canadian stuff.
I know.
I'm just
it's all over the place, right?
Right. Yeah.
And we were blown away. We were just absolutely shocked at how interesting it was, and in particular how good the mouthfeel was. So we're weird in that we do all of our blending at cask strength.
Okay.
Most of the industry does their blending at 20%.
Now, would that be because it's harder to do multiple in a day if you're doing them at cask strength? You got to blow out your palate.
I think it's part of that, but actually, some of the interviews I've read with master distillers, what they say is, particularly when you're trying to make something very consistent. So you're making, I always do 4 Roses as an example. You're doing 4 Roses small batch, and you want it to taste the same, right? The point isn't to sort of elaborate or innovate off of small batch. The point is to make it taste the same. Okay, and when you bring it down to 20%, and you're using components that you're very used to because you've made them 100 times before, it's actually easier to identify flaws when you bring it down to 20%.
Okay, I could see that.
Which makes total sense. The thing is, these folks all have like 10 years of training at this. You know what I mean? When I taste whiskey at 20%, I taste watered down crap. Right? Like I don't have that formal training of like, oh, that weird little note is some mistake or some flaw that we've made in the whiskey. Instead, for me, when we're blending and I really want the mouthfeel to be right, I can only do that at strength.
That makes sense to think about mouthfeel as cask strength because that's what people are going to get.
Exactly.
And if you water it down, that's a whole. If anything, that is one of the biggest things.
You're
that's going to
immediately changing the viscosity, everything, right?
Right.
And so with this, when we tasted the wheat component, we were like, this wheat component has spectacular mouthfeel, and we were really excited about that. But the interesting thing about making, so we were immediately like, we're going to make a, I don't know, Canadian version of a wheater, right? We were like, all right, we're going to do wheat and corn immediately, right? But the thing about it was, when you make a wheater, a lot of times you lose the wheat character as it ages.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right?
It always
kind
seems
of always
like more of the delicate,
deal, right? You lose kind of the grain character the more it ages. But you get so much really lovely texture. You get a lot of finish. You get a lot of things from the long aging process.
Yep.
And so it was actually Sammy. This wasn't my idea. Sammy, who's on our blending team. He's our better half of the blending team. So Sammy basically was like, why don't we take this 21-year-old corn that was in new wood and let's lay the wheat on top of it. We'll get everything that we like, all the elegance of really old corn.
Okay.
But we'll retain some of the kind of Irish butter, shortbread cookie, kind of minty notes that you find in wheat.
That makes a lot, like just thinking of that through, like corn seems to make the most sense if you're going to try to do something like that because you're not going to get that same result with rye. At least
Exactly.
This is me doing it in my head.
Yep.
You could totally correct me.
No, that's right.
But like rye wouldn't go with that. Even malted barley won't go with that. Although I could see the two going a little bit better together.
Yep.
But corn, I like to think of corn as like chicken. Like it can take on a lot of flavors of other things. You know.
That is hilarious. I said something extremely similar to that today when I was talking about blending. I was saying like blending is a lot like cooking. You don't necessarily have to grow the food at the farm to know how to cook. Right,
Okay,
like
yeah.
there's like,
Makes
and
sense.
it's a little bit similar where it's like we don't have to actually be the ones who distilled the whiskey. Everything we make is sourced, right?
Right.
So like we don't actually have to be the ones to distill the whiskey to have a pretty good idea of how to prepare it, right? And I use chicken as an example. So you don't have to have a chicken farm to make good chicken, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yes, but I totally agree that corn is like corn plays really well with everyone.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right,
All right,
you're
let's
killing
try
me.
it. I know. I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
All right. Cheers, everybody at home. By the way.
Cheers. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that a lot. You're right. Totally delicate. Like almost. So there is a finish there that I'm attributing more so to the higher ABV than anything. But what I really like about this is that it's. All right, hold on. What is the ABV on this? Because that will actually.
116.2.
Of course you know that.
58.1%.
You should know that.
I should.
Just figure out. Let me hide this so people have seen it at that point. So when I taste this, I am definitely getting that wheat for sure. It's got a little bit more body, which I'm guessing is coming from the corn. And then the ABV at 116 is actually nicer because I think if it was too high, it would overwhelm the wheat.
Yes.
So this is nice. I like this a lot.
Thank you.
And actually, I will say I haven't tried the other four in a while, which I have off screen here. But this is definitely, to my recollection, the most easily drinkable of the six.
This
or five so far.
Okay. So I get the question all the time. What is your favorite whiskey you've made? Right.
Of course.
You gotta. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it's like asking somebody what their favorite song is. Some people have a favorite song.
Yeah.
But music has so much breadth.
Yeah.
That it's a little silly, right? It's like, okay, well, what's my favorite jazz song compared to my favorite I don't know, rock and roll song, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit silly.
And it's going to change day to day.
And it's going to change the day to day, and it's going to change if you want to be dancing or if you want to be,
Thrashing.
mellowed out or thrashing or whatever you want to be doing, right?
Yes.
And so,
The guy with no hair. You're
No,
talking about
yeah.
thrashing, yeah, of course.
so for me, there's a really fundamental difference between my favorite whiskey, my best whiskey, my most pleasing whiskey, whatever it is. This is the one I categorize as my most pleasing whiskey.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
I am if I'm gonna sit down and like turn on a game and drink one of our whiskeys, and not that I'm not gonna think about it. That's not probably not
I was
something
gonna say,
I
at
should
this point,
say.
well, but more so at this point, I can't imagine. Like, I can't even drink a whiskey like casually anymore.
No, I know,
and
right?
this is
It's
your
like,
job,
It's
you know?
right, and so, but if I were to drink something where the point isn't for me to sort of get into it and spend the next half an hour trying to figure out what's in it and what notes I'm getting and get all crazy about that, this is the one I drink.
Okay.
This is 100% the one I drink.
I totally get that. I like this one a lot. It smells. I won't say this is not a very complex nose, but
Very
the
straightforward.
The taste matches, but it's all altogether pleasing. So actually, the video I put out earlier today on the channel, just my
Yes.
typical Friday
Yes, yes,
release,
yes.
was Bushmills 12.
Okay.
Have you ever? I'm
I've
assuming
had Bushmills 12.
I found that as I was filming it, I was just like, this is just so easy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's 40% too. So I was like, I want to like sit. I'm almost gonna put an ice cube in it, like, which I never ever do really. But at that point, I was just like, this is so easy, and this is obviously not 40%, but
No.
it follows some of the same themes where it's just tasty and easy, and there's still that difference of picking out the wheat versus the corn. But like, if I were to try to pick out some flavors in here, other than, I would actually say most of the flavors that I could really pick out and identify are probably coming from the corn, or the oak, I should say. It's more typical bourbon stuff, but it's not like vanilla. It's more like caramel. And actually, maybe I take that back. Let me actually have a sip and not just talk.
I find corn and wheat are much more similar than corn and barley, corn and rye and wheat, rye and barley. Like, really, if you look at the four grains that we predominantly use in North America, wheat and corn behave the closest.
Okay.
And I think that's often why the corn drowns out the wheat. Right? It's so easy to pick out rye when it's blended with corn.
Yeah.
Because it's really bringing a different characteristic. And I actually remember asking a distiller down in Kentucky about that. And I said, what do you expect from a really good wheater? And he said, I expect the wheat to get out of the way
Okay.
of the corn, right? And it was basically like, we're putting the wheat in there because it's subtle, it's gentle, it's creamy, it's buttery. It just is like, it's like putting butter on pancakes, right? Your pancakes are already fluffy, but you're putting some butter on it and just making it like even more fun to consume.
I'll tell you, I don't have it readily available. Oh wait, I do actually. All right, so they totally can't hear me. Yeah, so you recognize the bottle here. So it doesn't have the mash bill on it. So this is the Woodford Reserve wheat, which I did not really like at all. Which I
and it tastes just like your whiskey.
Right, yeah. This is basically garbage, and no. What I was going to bring up about this, if I remember correctly, I actually think this might be close to 100% wheat, if not.
Oh.
No, I'm sorry, no, they're all 51%. All of Woodford's stuff is 51%.
Okay.
Of all of the different, like they have the malt, the rye, the whatever. So this one's 51% wheat, and I remember not liking this one because I don't think that wheat gives enough flavor to make it interesting. And yours is what, 25%?
27%,
27%.
8-year-old wheat, 73%, 21-year corn.
And I think that was a good choice for a lot of reasons. Me trying to tell you that was a good choice.
No, thank you.
I don't know. Like, I can't think of what else I haven't said about this other than sounding like I'm a shill, because it really is very good. But this is an easy drinker. Like,
It's a fun one to start too.
It is. That's actually a really
you're just
good
like
point.
you're rolling right into it. I think the thing I would say about this whiskey that is different from the other whiskeys we've made, is when I start thinking about mouthfeel, I I really start thinking about the whole palate.
Yep.
And so you'll get whiskey that has like good mouthfeel down the middle of the palate, or you get, it'll be really heavily tannic, right? So it'll give you that kind of like dry on the side palate.
Yeah.
Or you get kind of, my favorite thing is snap, crackle, pop. It's
Okay.
like that. It's like that.
When it's hitting like your saliva.
Yes,
yeah,
and it's almost like massaging, and it almost always coincides with cinnamon, right? Like cinnamon sugar toast snaps, crackles, and pops down your palate.
That's
love
funny for me.
that.
I tend to taste when I get cinnamon. I find it's more like in the center of my tongue.
So, yeah. So like it goes right down the center
Yeah.
and it coats the sides, right?
Okay.
Because cinnamon's dry. Cinnamon's
Right.
inherently dry.
Yeah.
So it gives you that kind of. But when you match it with, butter and sugar, which
Yeah.
is the only way to have cinnamon, right?
Texas Roadhouse
whiskey.
knows what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You get that sensation right down the middle of the palate. Okay, this whiskey, when we made this whiskey, the wheat had a lot of that right down the middle.
Okay.
But when we put the corn in it, it started to be really viscous on the whole palate.
That
so
makes
we get
sense.
like oil all over even the roof of your palate. And this is so there are some sort of cliches in the industry that I really don't like.
Okay.
One of my favorite cliches
Mhm.
is a chewy whiskey.
Mm.
I actually did a whiskey
that's because-
festival last night, and someone was like
Right.
on this whiskey, and I was like, "Yeah, you're chewing my whiskey, and I love it."
Yeah. I feel like that's got to come from the whole concept of Kentucky Chew, right?
Mhm.
But which, like,
Yeah.
I don't, in my opinion, unless you have your mouth exposed to air, it's not doing anything. You need to pass air over your tongue and your palate and everything in order to taste things better, at least for me.
Yep.
It will accentuate everything, and I've pointed that out in several videos. Mostly, I discovered that by talking on camera.
Ooh.
Because I took a sip and then like immediately just kind of breathed in, and then I would talk and I'd be like, oh, that's getting better because I'm talking. And
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, the number one challenge I have talking on camera and then drinking whiskey, or talking in general for an hour and then drinking whiskey, is it dries out your throat.
Yes.
And anything that has like a hint of dry
Mhm.
really is accentuated.
Yep.
And I will taste whiskeys that I love. I'll even taste my whiskeys on camera and be like, did we really make it that dry? And then I'm like, oh, no. I've been talking for 90 minutes and I haven't had a drop of water or whatever it needs to be.
I used to make that mistake early on when I used to live stream. I think I started in like 2017. I started live streaming. It was actually when YouTube was like, hey, use our stuff to live stream.
Yeah.
And one of the first, there's two things that you can do wrong. And anybody listening, this is interesting in case you care, because I know a lot of you guys actually have your own channels. Always give yourself a second after you drink before you talk. Otherwise, you're going to choke. So if you take a sip, you don't want to be like, hello. You're going to be like, oh my God. You're going to look like you have no idea what you're doing. And then the other thing is drink water. Otherwise, you end up like several of my earlier streams. One of which was actually in a shower at a hotel room. So after being in the hot tub. So that's a fun story. Anyway, so let's take a minute and just kind of chat with some people in the chat here.
Let's
So
do it.
we have a couple of questions that came in on the Google form, but I'm
Yep.
curious if anything else is going on here. So two things. Number one, the Woodford Reserve, somebody pointed out that is actually a 4-grain, which fine, but it's still 51% wheat, and that was kind of the point I was trying to make. Is your tub or shower one of the things to do? Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that went. I wouldn't say that went wrong. It just probably wasn't the smartest choice. All right, so we've got Emily asked a question. Given popularity of Canadian rye, why do you use it in such small amounts aside from batch 3?
Good question. So there are a couple reasons. One, Canadian rye has done really well, but you might notice that our grain ratios for our other non-rye whiskeys often resemble that of bourbon, and part of that is because a lot of people have done rye from Canada. There isn't a lot of really interesting cast strength corn dominant blends coming out of Canada, and they're really fun. Okay. And
now, what makes them really fun?
Thank you. That's a really great question.
You can't say that.
No. That's a great question. They take wood incredibly well. So when you're when you're blending,
Yeah.
like the first mistake we made was, okay, this is our best, most complex whiskey. This is our second best, most complex whiskey. This is our third best complex, best whiskey. Jam them all together, right? And you would think that would make sense because if something is standalone really good and something else is standalone really good, I don't know, wouldn't good plus good equal great?
Potentially.
Not the case at all, right? Because it's like food, right? You actually you don't want to take a completely prepared meal and just slap it on top of another completely prepared meal. It doesn't actually create the best flavors.
Can I have some like pistachio salmon on top of my like Salisbury steak?
Yes, exactly. Right. It's like
I picked Salisbury steak as something good. Boy,
right.
Trashy upbringing, I guess.
But it just doesn't match the way you want it to. And so oh man, oh god, I did say that. Okay,
well,
yeah.
I know. That's why I laughed to myself.
No, I know you laughed, and then I
my
saw
brain
it.
immediately was like, "So does your mom?" But I'm like, I don't know Nick well enough.
Yeah, so
At least I don't know your mom.
Well, I went on the whiskey dick and talked about wood all day. So basically, the way Canadian whiskey is designed is
good recovery, by the way. I'm impressed. You got right back into
that. No. Yeah, that is to create components to create effectively like all the cliches are like colors to paint with, right? You basically are making whiskeys with the intention of we want a broad swath of pretty straightforward flavors that we can manipulate, we can blend, and we can leave up to the artist, right?
I like that.
To the
yeah,
blender.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so with the corn components, they're incredibly clean. They're like a great base note, right? They're like incredibly clean, and they actually take wood really well. So you can really do a lot of stuff from a maturation standpoint that where it really it changes, but it creates like this great resonance, this incredibly sort of straightforward, great taste profile that blends well.
Okay. So that's really where it comes down. It's corn. The corn coming out of Canada is cool because it will blend well.
Right. And
so it's a good base, like this one, for example. Yeah.
Frankly, like a lot of the reason why Canadian rye has done really well is because it's been passed off as American rye. Okay. You can't do that with corn and call it bourbon. That's why people don't do it. That's why people haven't done it yet, because making these kind of corn-dominant whiskeys, they're hard to categorize. And people tend to adhere to category above flavor sometimes. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. It's somewhat related. Canadian whiskeys tend to have a very specific flavor to them that I do not love. Why doesn't yours have that? Because can you like talk to Lot 40 or like 40 Creek or like any of these places and tell them how to do things differently so that they don't suck?
I mean,
well, that's me saying it, not you, by the way. So, because I do have a Lot 40 Dark Oak over there, which I was sent to by a viewer, and I tried it, and my brain said this is about the best, other than Found North, Canadian whiskey that I've had, and I actually mean that. But it still has that flavor at the finish that I don't love. What is that?
I don't. Yeah, so it's really interesting because I don't think Canadian has a distillation or a raw ingredient problem.
Okay.
I think they blend it to a style that is very popular in Canada. That is very, very popular. I mean, the fact is, Canadian whiskey was the number one seller in the United States from 1865 until 2010.
Right.
And is still far and away the most consumed whiskey in North America.
Do you know why those dates are important? So
Civil War.
Well, 2010 specifically. That was when. So 2008. This is my theory, but I'm going to say it as if it's fact.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So when 2008's recession hit, you had a whole lot of people who you found a lot of people getting into hobbies that specifically maybe didn't take money or were things that they knew about. You had the rise of YouTube. You had people like myself. I didn't start in 2010. I started in 2015. But at the time, sorry, I'm going somewhere with this. So in 2010, you had the rise of certain channels like Ralphie, for example. And people started getting into whiskey as a hobby, a thing to do to take away some of this pain of the recession. And at that point, people started realizing what good whiskey was. That was when a lot of people were like, Johnny Walker actually kind of sucks. Even the Blue, like, which up until that point had been the pinnacle as far as the normal person knew. And you had better whiskeys starting to get made. So you had the recession, I believe, brought up the craft beer industry, as well as a couple of years later, the craft whiskey industry. So then suddenly people knew a lot more about whiskey. People were trying better stuff. Now you've got that older stuff that's not super good falling out of favor.
So I
eventually got to my point.
I totally know what you mean, and I think when I think about the sort of the hobby effect of whiskey, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Like,
right.
Totally.
That's a good phrase. Hobby effect of whiskey. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened? I think what also happened was the brands and the producers that were making great whiskey for the connoisseur. I don't know what the. I don't want to. Aficionado sounds a little arrogant. I just mean the people who take it seriously.
Yeah,
whatever
right.
however you want. Enthusiasts, right? Okay. So the brands that were really doing well with the enthusiasts, I think, started to do better with the regular drinkers. And I think there was a little bit of they moved towards each other a little bit. And I think that was when not only did the quality of the really premium stuff start to go up, but I think it kind of,
Elevated
what's that
everything?
ship? So
a rising tide
raises all ships, kind of thing. Yeah, totally. And I think so for Canadian, I think I think they've been a little bit stuck in the prison of their own success.
Okay.
They have crushed. It's outrageous when you think about 2000. Rye in the U.S. was doing like 100,000 cases, right? And then
that's
Rye,
like a day now.
Rye in 2020 did 1.7 million cases or something like that.
Yeah.
Irish whiskey in 2000 was doing something
Irish
like
whiskey's a whole different.
a couple 100,000 cases, and now is doing like 6.5 million cases, right?
Irish whiskey has been just gigantic lately.
Yeah,
that's
totally,
why the reason I
right?
cover it every month. Like, I
nuts.
love Irish whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Canadian in 2000, 15 million cases. Canadian 2020, 20 million cases. This is just the U.S.
Okay.
So like
that's still so much. Wow.
It's so much.
But percentage wise, they grew about 25%, whereas everybody else is
Everybody's
percentage.
booming.
But that's still a huge market volume.
But as a result, I think they just haven't had the pressure to move in the direction of the modern sort of style. And that doesn't mean that they make bad liquid. It means that they blend it, they water it down, they chill filter it, they add additives. They still do all the things that were totally acceptable and even not frowned upon, like 50 years ago.
Yeah, even 20 years
And they
ago.
don't have to. They don't have to worry about it because the game in producing whiskey, if your goal is to make money, is volume. Volume all day, right?
That makes sense.
And so for us, we didn't see this sort of. It wasn't just like, oh, there's old stuff and we're gonna fix it. It was much more. We're gonna kind of reimagine what this whiskey can look like. And guess what? To circle all the way back, I hate that flavor you're talking about.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so we blended out.
Yeah.
And I think the motto should be blend in good flavor rather than try to sort of blend out everything, right? That's how blending had got a bad reputation, was people started blending out flavor, right? It was like, oh, let's make it more mellow, let's make it more mild. And then it ends up having this kind of chalky fake sugar flavor on the finish that I don't like, right? And it's instead, let's actually blend from a creative and artistic standpoint.
Okay.
That's I'm sitting, but that's me on my soapbox.
You're high.
Yeah.
So I just realized that a decent portion of your job is tasting that awful flavor. And I think that deserves another drink.
Yes, I love that. Okay, please do the honors.
I got all happy with our
I like that. I like that's a segue. That's a segue. And then I'll actually get all the way back to answering Emily's question about why we don't use more rye.
All right, so let's see how we do here. That one was better.
Oh,
Ooh.
there we go.
That was almost like I almost did it again.
I wouldn't care.
That was almost like Foley art there. It had like
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bubble
yeah.
and everything. So there were a few. Before you get to Emily's question again, we'll try that one more time. By the way, anybody who's never seen Nick before, this is exactly how every
This is
one of
how
our
it
streams go.
goes.
we get on tangents and we talk them out until we both are. Usually he teaches me something.
Until we're both drunk.
that happens eventually either way. So a couple of things. So John Cran says that he's got the batch 4, which is phenomenal. Yes. So I have the batch 4 right here. This one was I know you know it, but so this is the American. No, this is the cast strength. Yeah, this is the American, right?
So this is...
Sorry, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm like reading the label. He's let me talk.
No. This is... So this was a 4 whiskey blend. Technically an 18 year because the 2 young whiskeys in here were 18 years. Mm-hmm. But we used a 21-year corn and a 25-year corn that was in Hungarian oak, which is the main whiskey in here was the Hungarian oak. This was 124.8 proof. That's right.
Didn't even know it off the top of your head.
Oh, God, I know.
Oh, I'm ashamed of you.
You should be ashamed of me. I used to be able to rattle off the components in all their ABVs.
I imagine
now
that.
It's just like the more whiskey I drink and the more we make. It's getting worse and worse. Yeah, sorry. So what was the question? So that's what this is.
No, there's no question. I was mostly just pointing out that he has the 4 and that it's fantastic.
The 4 is awesome.
And I was going to agree with him. Yeah. I do still think my favorite of all of them is the 2, but I have yet to try the 6. So,
baby.
But we're going to see. Couple more things. So Emily asked, did Mad Men play a role in that? And I don't think so, only because that was Canadian Club. Yeah. And I have not reviewed Canadian Club on this channel, probably for a reason. Sometimes I'm up for subjecting myself to things, but that's... After the Black Velvet episode, I'm like less interested in hurting myself. So yeah. Also Black Velvet probably in Crown Royal, of course, accounts for a ton of that sales.
Crown Royal's ridiculous.
Yeah, Crown Royal is ridiculous.
I believe Crown Royal is the number 1 seller in Texas, and I believe it's because of the purple bag.
Okay, I could see. I mean, it's a brilliant marketing thing.
It's an unbelievable.
I saw a person who they had a whole bunch of those Canadian bags, the Crown Royal bags, and they sewed them into a cape. And then they just wore the cape around.
I love that.
Yeah, at like a whiskey event. I'm like,
lie. That's
it's pretty.
That's strong.
If you're gonna go to a whiskey event, that's all right. I have a picture of me sitting in a throne of like a Canadian. Why do I keep saying? I want to keep saying Canadian Club, Crown Royal throne, like a chair, and I got like a hat and everything. Yeah, it's. All right, so let's see. Before we get into this, I just want to catch up on the chat a little bit. So. Hey Nick, I picked up a bottle of the Found North 12-year-old ex-sherry barrel finished Binny's hand-picked.
Binny's, that's a good pick.
Wow. Where was that? Where's Binny's?
Binny's is like the king of Chicago when it comes to liquor stores. Chicago, I think they have 45 liquor stores in Illinois.
Okay.
And they actually do amazing barrel picks. They've done some collabs with Julius. Of course,
okay.
Right.
It's funny because I know the name Binny's, but I don't know why.
It's just they own Illinois when it comes to retail.
And Illinois. That makes sense. Okay.
And also, you can't ship anything to Illinois. I don't know if you know these stories, but basically,
not really. No.
Okay, years ago, dirty little secret. Years ago, a bunch of people were shipping into Illinois, and they like hunted them down, sued them, like, wow. Man, and they got them for not paying taxes, of course, right? Because they were Illinois taxes. Yeah. But as a result, like there's just like a blanket over Illinois. Liquor stores will whether it's legal or not ship to like every state. Mm-hmm.
Except for Illinois.
No one will touch Illinois.
And so it was Binny's that hunted them down? Yeah.
I don't think I don't think it was. Maybe, no. I don't think it was actually Binny's, but it's just one of those things where as a result, Binny's can throw weight around and they as a result they get great access, and when you get great access, you get great barrel picks. They got one of our best barrel picks. Shocking.
Nice.
It was really good. Yeah.
Nice. So that might be a little hint to something that's going to happen later. Stay tuned. Teaser.
I don't even know.
I have no idea what I'm talking about. All right, so let's see. Also, Crown Royal uses a crap ton of rye crop for a flat base.
Oh, interesting.
Actually,
they do a mash bill. They're one of the only Canadian distilleries that does an actual mash bill instead of doing the grains individually. You know, weird.
So I'm having sometimes people put like abbreviations on it. What is CC12? Come on, Bill, get
Canadian
the
Club 12.
Canadian quote. All right, thank you. Yeah, I was talking about that. I haven't tried that yet. AP cast strength is here now, and it's good. I got mine. All right. So, despite Bill's take, I think regular lot 40 is just fine. Yeah, I will absolutely admit that there is a part of that Canadian taste that I don't like that not everybody will dislike. But there's a reason. Like, I think I've probably done 5 Canadian whiskeys on the channel compared to probably like 80 bourbons. You know, a ton of stuff. I've got like probably close to 300 bottles in this room, and maybe 3 of them are Canadian. So that tells you a lot. All right, so let's talk about the number 6 here, the batch 6. So I'll throw up the little graphic while you
Cool. Very
lay
cool.
it out for us.
Yeah, so basically with batch 6, we kind of took what we loved about batch 2 and what we loved about batch 4, and that's where we started.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm going to love this.
Yeah, so basically...
Well, actually, not if your analogy earlier.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, we'll see. Yes.
But basically the foundational piece of batch 2 was the first corn whiskey we ever worked with. It was originally a 13-year corn that was put into new oak and aged for another 7 years. So it was a 20-year corn.
Okay.
And when we made batch 2, we didn't just buy as much as we needed. We bought a ton of it because we loved it.
Right.
And we've continued to age it. And then same true with the really old corn component that we used in batch 4 that was in Hungarian oak. 25 year in Hungarian oak.
Love Hungarian oak.
Oh, God,
me
me
so
too.
Good.
Oh,
yeah.
me too. And so that we also bought all of it and continued to age it. And as a result, we have supply of those 2 bases. So when we made batch 6, it was really interesting. With batch 2, what we often hear about batch 2 is that the palate was wonderful. People really loved the whiskey. But the biggest complaint we ever got about it was that the finish was a little abbreviated.
Okay.
When we made batch 4, we tried to like really
Accentuate it.
Stretch it out.
Yes.
And that was one of the reasons why we used this really old Hungarian oak component. It has this never-ending finish.
Okay.
And so with that whiskey, we always said, "Oh, I love batch 4, but it doesn't have the punch of batch 2."
Okay.
Okay, so we're making batch 6, which is the next in this sort of evens sequence that we started with here, where it was like, all right, 2, 4, 6, they're all corn dominant with rye as sort of the subcategory, right? And so when we made it, we were like, all right, give the people what they want. So we started with the foundation of batch 2 and the foundation of batch 4, and we got them to a ratio that we want, and then we built a whole whiskey around it.
Okay.
And so this is 5 whiskey blend. There's a 17, a 21, and a 26-year corn component.
Okay.
It's like 21 and 11 months, actually, something like that, but who cares?
Right.
And then there's
Stupid
an 18
laws.
and a 19-year rye.
18 and 19 year?
Ryes.
Okay, yeah.
And the grain ratio ends up being 87% corn, 12% rye, 1% malted barley.
That makes me feel better because when I'm smelling this, I would not have picked out rye.
It's way it's.
I'm sure it's going to come out on the taste because 12%.
And it's 12% liquid ratio. So whenever you look at so I saw somebody asking about mash bills earlier.
Yeah, I think that's over here.
Yes. Okay.
So somebody asked, how do you go about choosing a mash bill?
It was Zachary, right?
Zachary. Yep.
Yeah. So we don't do a mash bill because it's Canadian. So effectively, the biggest difference between American and Canadian whiskey is American whiskey does all of the grain blending
right
at the beginning, hence the mash bill.
Right.
Canadian does. All right, since I'm on your show, I'll really explain this. Usually I say what they do is 100% corn, 100% rye, 100% wheat, 100% barley. That's not actually 100% true. What they do is they do separate streams. The thing is they don't need the enzymes from the barley to convert starch to sugar. They have been cultivating enzymes for 110 years. Guess what? We do it in the U.S. as well. Most bourbons have cultivated enzymes in them. They will never tell you that. But basically, you don't need barley anymore.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Barley is there primarily because of efficiency. It will convert starch to sugar. really, really effectively. It increases your yield. You get more alcohol. You make more money.
Okay.
Right? So the Canadians said, screw that. We're going to add enzymes. We'll convert all of the starch to sugar.
I'm sure the Canadians were much more polite than that.
Yeah, they probably were. Right? No, so they're not doing. They're really not.
Sorry.
No. So I got it.
That really just doesn't work for us.
No. Yeah, exactly. Right. So what they did was they started cultivating the enzymes and doing separate streams. So they would do 100% corn. Their corns never have any barley in them.
Okay.
Their wheats never have any barley in them. Not so with rye. Sometimes they still add a little bit of barley into rye.
Okay.
They do it for a flavor and consistency reason.
Oh, interesting.
But effectively, doing...
That's really surprising.
They're doing separate streams.
Yeah.
And so when you see our grain ratio, we actually measure the liquid ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Why the hell is this important? The reason this is important is because there's almost twice as much starch in corn as rye.
Okay. Yeah.
So mathematically speaking, if there's twice as much twice as much starch in the corn as there is in the rye.
Twice as much alcohol.
Yes.
Yep.
So when you do a mash bill, right, and you're 75% corn and you're 20% rye, like 10% of the alcohol is actually coming from the rye.
That makes sense.
So for us, when we do our 80-20 ratio, which we did with 2 and 4, everybody's always like, God, but there's so much rye in there. Yeah, because what you're used to is an 80-20 having about half as much rye content as it does in ours.
Okay.
So ours, when it's 87-12, still has a ton of rye relative to what we're used to with bourbon.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. Yeah.
The reason we have 1% malted barley in these is because we use rye that had a tiny bit of barley in them.
I was wondering.
We're not just
I noticed that earlier.
Sorry. There it is.
No, it's all right. We're 45 minutes in before the first episode. That's totally fine.
We're not just like, water dropping in a tiny bit of malted barley. It's residual from the.
That's so funny because I looked at the what would you call it? Not mash bill, but what would you call that?
We just say grain ratio.
Grain ratio.
Right?
Okay.
And it's fine to call it a mash bill because that's what people are used to.
Yeah.
So
I was looking at the grain ratio before we started here, and I saw the 1% barley, and it was my intent to ask you exactly about that because I'm like, was it just like not enough? And you were like, I need a little bit of barley. Yeah, that's funny.
Exactly.
Did you just have a sip?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've had like 3 sips.
Stream over, everybody. Goodbye.
I've done that so many times on your show. I talk and drink as part
it's
of
totally
my...
fine.
I'm so sorry.
Well,
Cheers.
I'll talk about this in a sec. Cheers. So when Nick is on the channel, I often will sit here and listen to him talk because this is how I get information. Like the way you guys watch my channel because I research it, whatever. This is how I learn new stuff. Is I just listen to Nick talk, and so the whole time I'm just kind of like yes, go on, and I don't drink because I'm like waiting for him to take a breath so I can be like let's have a sip. But he's told me to cut him off before, but I never want to because it's But wow, all right. I totally just undermined the whole flavor that's happening in my mouth right now. This is delicious.
Thank you.
It is. Before we're done drinking, I'm gonna have this next to the 2 and the 4 because of what you said.
Okay, I'm excited.
Let me have this sip again with intent to think about it.
Okay. I'll keep my mouth shut for more than 10 seconds.
I literally don't think that's possible. He has to hold his mouth shut.
I also had to not breathe. I can still talk back here.
I was prepared to just let it sit in silence. It's like the worst thing you could do on a show here, but I was like, I'm just going to let it go until he has to talk. That's great. All right. So this one's a lot harder to pick apart here. And that rye for sure is coming out now. Like 100%. You don't... I do not smell it as much on the nose, but anybody who's watched me on ADHD Whiskey's channel, where I did Matt Madness, basically it's a blind flight, and you don't know what he sent you, and you try stuff. And the first one that he sent, it was I think it was Wild Turkey Rye, just the regular 81, and I thought it was bourbon. And he was just, is this a bourbon? Yes or no? And I said yes. And afterwards I was like, I couldn't even tell a rye from a bourbon based off just the nose too. But that's not surprising that I can't smell it. But apparently I need to get better at that. But
I have thoughts, but my thoughts usually offend when it comes to. We'll just
No,
offend people.
that's all right.
I think with rye, and actually this gets a little bit back to Emily's question.
Oh, eventually, yeah. We're finally getting there.
Rye is really feisty, and there are a couple ways to temper rye. One is to water it down.
Okay.
That's the easiest. Two is to bombard it with new oak, which not only tempers the rye, but it works. It tastes good.
Okay.
The problem is that it makes it taste a lot like bourbon.
Mm.
And so the third way to do it is to blend it really, really carefully and take a long time to do it, which is what we did with 1 and 3. And they took so much longer to make than the corn dominant whiskeys.
Can I see the bottle?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
While you're talking. Yeah.
So what I think is interesting about that is, in truth, I think a lot of times people like the concept of rye a little bit better than they like the actual taste of it. They want their ryes to taste like bourbon. The American whiskey distilleries have responded by making their ryes taste a whole lot like bourbon by making 51% rye.
That makes a lot of sense.
New oak.
Yeah.
Because MGP doesn't do it, but a lot of people do it.
One thing that's funny, the first rye I ever did on the channel, it was like episode 3, was Bullet Rye. And I remember tasting that and actually being like, especially at that point, I hadn't had hundreds of bottles.
Like, wow, it's like a spicy bourbon.
Right, yeah. And I remember thinking, I was like, wow, this is like a whole different world. But that was 95%. I still remember that because it was so much different than a lot of the other ones I've had. And I do think if you're going to go rye, you should go high rye. And then I did some like Redemption ryes. Those are high ryes as well as Pikesville is one of my favorite ryes. That one's 100.
Pikesville's cool.
Is that 100% or is that I think
Pikesville? No, it's 100 proof, right?
100. It's 100 proof. You're right. Yeah, that's where
I thought it was still 95.5, but
it might be 95.5. Yeah, I don't remember. But either way, that's a great rye.
Fun question for you.
Okay.
Do you have a guess as to why MGP has a boatload of 95.5 rye lying around that they've always made?
Do I have a guess? Maybe, but I don't have an answer. The guess is maybe it's easier to blend because it's only 5% something other than rye.
It's an old Seagram's plant.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's made for blended whiskey.
Oh, okay.
It was made for blended whiskey.
I was close.
And then they just started selling it as straight rye.
Yeah.
Which is effectively what other brands have done with Canadian whiskey. They just buy the rye components that were used for blending from Canada.
Makes sense.
Sell them, right? Because it was like, oh, wait. Everybody suddenly likes rye again for the first time in 70 years. Let's just take the blending components and do it.
So actually, it's funny. I was a little worried that this was going to be the case when I said that
is it 51?
Pikesville is 51%.
It's 51?
So whatever. I don't know. They did it better.
Jason.
Yeah. So let's see. Thanks for answering my question. Thanks for teaching me about the difference between mash bill and grain ratio. Yeah. Nice. Little things like that. Oh, by the way.
I didn't answer his question at all. I just said about
that might be Zach.
No, I know, but I didn't actually answer it. His question was, how much do whiskeys you've had in the past influence decisions made?
Well, the first part...
Pretty cool question.
There's a question mark with the first part.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Answer
So I was just going to... So I want to let people know what you taught me before the stream.
Okay.
So Nick has this little trick. Actually, you will do better describing it because you did a good job for me. But
do you want me to?
Whatever, I'll do it. All right, so Nick basically said that he is very sensitive to the smell of dish soap or more specifically glass. And it's because glass tends to be washed and it will have a dish soap smell. So what he does is when he would smell things, he would often pick that up. So when I gave him a couple of the Starward picks, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, he immediately turned it over, and he's like right over my rug too, and he's got this thing at like a 120-degree angle. I'm like, how is it not falling out? And he's just spinning it, and nothing's dripping out. So clearly he's a pro. But he said that he coats the entire inside of the glass with whiskey, and it was right up to the rim, to eliminate that dish soap smell whatsoever. Which I thought was very interesting, and actually it's something I'm going to try to remember, because there's been times where I have tried a whiskey for the first time, especially on a live stream, and I'm like, oh, it smells soapy, which can also happen if they cut it wrong.
Right.
So
100%.
And there have been times where I've been like, this smells like crap, and it may have been that. I have poured that when that's happened. I've poured it into 2 or 3 separate glasses.
So when we're doing
still, yeah.
so when we're getting like really neurotic about our blend at the end, and we're just tweaking 1% in particular, you really want. It's such a silly thing to say, but you want consistency with your glassware.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So not only will we do what I showed you beforehand, but we'll actually take a hand on top of the glass, slap it, and then we'll actually rub the edge of the glass so you get literally no glass smell whatsoever. Yeah. And then of course,
well, actually, I guess
do the old barley trick.
Yep.
This is one of my favorite tricks.
Yeah,
that was like one of my favorite
then,
things. You heat it up and you can smell all the grain. Yeah. The first time I ever learned that was a peated whiskey distillery, right? Because it's like you can actually smell the smoke.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can smell the phenols that were on the. That's pretty fun.
No, I learned that too. The same kind of thing. I was like, why are they doing this? And to heat it up, and I mean, hot makes evaporating molecules in the air and all that stuff. So, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
It's not great if you're drinking and then you're trying to drive home later.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, you're like the guy that puts your hands out the window before the coffee even comes. So vinegar solution could break up soap film too, but then it's gonna smell like vinegar, even if you rinse it out. Like I feel like that's trading one problem for a worse problem. So now people are saying Pikesville is 55% at 110. Like I don't.
We just totally botched
Hold
that.
on.
Do we have Pikesville?
I have it right here.
You're right. It's 110.
Like super. All right. So it's ow. Jeez. That was a kneecap, or at least used to be. I'm not used to doing this side by side, so everything is off. So 110 proof.
Yeah, that's right.
But it doesn't have the mash bill on here at all.
So, it's funny. I used to know everything about everybody else's whiskey.
Yep. Now it's just your own.
Just don't have
You're
time anymore. I know. I'm so self-centered. I also can't try them all anymore. I used to try everything, but it's like.
So grab 2 glasses.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's do this. Nothing spilled. But my nice microphone
might not survive.
It's funny when I put those up there earlier too. You don't have to drink all of that.
I don't plan on it.
Nick has to drive. I don't. Anyway, so when I put those up there earlier, I was like, I really hope I don't drop any of these. All right, so we have the 2 and the 4. The reason being that Nick made the bold claim that this is supposed to be an improvement upon both of them. And I could see that. From what I remember about the 2, the 6 has a lot that I remember about it, and that I liked about it. I know I didn't go into much detail, but at this point I've had several cast strengths, and going into detail about whiskey is not something that would make sense. But I can tell you I liked it either way. That's interesting. The 2 on the nose is not as well defined as I remember it being. Yeah, I definitely have nostalgia influencing my opinion of this whiskey so far. Let's see. Bill, you're drinking high proof. You won't feel that knee until tomorrow. That's probably true. All right, so this one tastes as if it has very high rye.
Much higher rye.
So too. Yeah,
well, much higher. 7% more. 7 percentage points more.
Yeah, actually, both of these have 19%.
That was a coincidence, by the way.
Actually, they both have the same grain.
I know.
Yeah.
That was an accident.
Yeah, that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah,
Either that or you had a type, yeah.
No, we have a type.
All right, so let's try the 4. Actually, I'll wait for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
That's what a gentleman does. Okay, again, very high with the rye. Like it's almost the entire flavor.
Did you notice the finishes?
No,
you're gonna have to go back.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back. But tell me about it.
I love 2. I absolutely love 2. A lot of people are nostalgic for 2.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people who just chime in and are like, 2's my favorite.
Yeah.
And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely adore this whiskey, and I think the nose is really interesting because I don't think it's our best nose. I think it's slightly.
Which one, the 2 or the 6?
2.
Okay.
I think 2's it's a little tight. Mm-hmm. The nose is a little tight.
I know what you mean,
but it's good. But it's just it doesn't like.
Yeah, and for anybody like I would describe where he's saying tight, I would say sharp. It's like it's exactly yes, it's short and it's powerful, but it's short. So yeah.
And I think the palate is awesome on 2. I love the palate, but it's a little abbreviated. And when you taste 4, when you nose 4, 4 I think is a much more resonant nose because I think frankly we were getting better, and it's a longer finish. But I don't think it pops quite as much as 2 does when the entry or the as Sammy would say, which I always love, is he describes it as the landing.
Okay.
Which I think is just an awesome way to think about
that's
whiskey.
after the initial taste
it's just
and before the
like,
finish.
How does it land? Not the mid palate. Like you just get that first. You know a whiskey that has.
Okay. So it's
you know
more
what I mean, like the immaculate landing, right? Like you know when you have a whiskey and the second it hits your lips, you're like, I like this.
It's like Will Ferrell.
Yeah. Once it
tastes so good once it goes past you.
No, that beer bong he did landed well. Yeah, exactly. I think the landing on 2 might be the best landing we've made. But I think that's one of the reasons why people love it because it was like you weren't expecting it. You didn't know what to expect from
brand
us.
New brand,
brand new style. Like the hell is this, you know? And it lands, and you're like, wow, I like this whiskey. 4, I think is more complex. It's more stretched out, but I didn't think it quite had as much. Just like, whoa, that landing is you're just immediately absorbed with it, but I think it's a better sipping whiskey.
I would say of the 3 of these, my favorite on the nose is actually number 6. So, which I was surprised because I just kind of went around here. But
6 is like maple syrup, molasses.
Yes, maple syrup
rich,
for sure. Yeah,
and then it has these subtle rock candy notes. 6 was
rock candy.
Oh yeah.
You know what's funny? I have a 8-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I have not had rock candy. Like they never let me have any. Right? Like when they've had it, I've never never even gotten the dad tax, which is a problem. Like, but I have not had rock candy probably since I was like their age. So it's not a flavor that's familiar to me.
That's
what, knowing that that's something you called out. Now the next time I see rock candy, I'm gonna
be like, yeah, excuse me, this is for work.
This is expense. It is amazing the things that you can expense justify. I bought a smoker. And I expensed it because I then made an Ardbeg barbecue sauce, which I have not done an episode yet, but I will. But I'm like, it's for work. So.
Oh, that's funny. Somebody wrote syrup versus rock candy subtle. When I think of rock candy, it's really funny because I think of rock candy. I always think of the Science Museum was always where I got rock candy.
Like the Boston Science
Museum. Yeah. From like when I was a kid, when I was 7 and I wasn't paying the dad tax.
Right.
And I always think of it as having a slight fructose note.
Okay.
So when I get a syrup, I always think of syrup as like obviously brown sugar,
right? But
also that slightly kind of earthy, almost dried leaves, right? Because I get this almost like dried leaves plus sugar plus kind of the burnt note.
So more of like a brown sugar plus an earthy note.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And whereas I think of rock candy, I always think of like a little bit more fructose.
Okay.
Does that help, Mark?
Maybe. Who knows?
Hopefully.
Maybe. So Canadian Chris, actually, he's the one that sent me the Lot 40. Which, by the way, Canadian Chris, so I know I mentioned this in the last stream. So he had the ingenious idea. Instead of like packing peanuts or those little air things that you get with Amazon, he packaged the whiskey using potato chips, like the bags of potato chips.
I love that.
And I loved it because, and he even said, he's like, these are some of the flavors that we have up here that you don't get down there. But also, I have to tell you, Chris, those little, he included these little coffee flavored, best I can do is call them like the wafer things, totally. or like Kit Kats almost.
Yeah.
Amazing. I have one left and I don't want to eat it because it's going to be so good. So thank you. Anybody who wants to send me anything, include like treats. Just because I'm like, not a small man. All right. So anyway, Canadian Chris asks, since some of your whiskeys are sourced from Canada, do they have up to 9.09% alcohol?
909 rule.
From other sources, fortified wine?
No. And it's funny because, you know, people scoff at that rule, and the history of that rule is not flattering for Canadian whiskey, in my opinion.
Please tell us.
No, it's just it was just an excuse to effectively allow people it was designed as a tax break, and it was allowed so you could put other things in there.
Okay.
And there's a minor logic to it, which is like, when you source barrels, you want to get the barrel right after it's been dumped, particularly if you're doing a wine barrel or any. We did an Isla cask with Gordon's, okay. And it was there was standing liquid of I believe they told us it was Ardbeg, and it tasted like Ardbeg 10. There was standing liquid in there when we got it and when we filled it.
Which is why you wanted it.
That's the point, right? Like, you want it
I've heard
while
that
it
from
still
a lot
has
of
liquid.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and people will say, there's 13 liters of liquid in the wood if you get it wet, right? So it's like, why is it such a big deal to add something to it? Nonetheless, I think for us,
more
it's
concentrated.
It
makes sense.
It would be too difficult of an explanation. We're trying to change minds about Canadian whiskey, and you got to do it one step at a time. And I think doing a 909, it's something we've talked about, obviously, because you talk about any rules that you can work with and work within. But it's just not something we've really thought too hard about doing yet.
Okay. Sugar Kitty has a good way. She says there's wet and then there's wet.
Sugar Kitty is the one who sent that. Thank you, Sugar Kitty.
Yeah. So I almost wish we would have had this one first. I get why we started with the 05.
Which one?
The 06.
The 6?
Because now I feel like my palate's a little blown to the point where I'm not appreciating this as much as I want to. Bad. But I will say, at least compared to the 2 and the 4, the 6 has a lot more body to it. It's a way more full flavor. And it is what I remember the 2 tasting like, but it smells better too. So I think if anything else, this might now become my new nostalgic. I remember the 6 is the best one that you guys have ever made. Yeah, the 2 was okay. Now the 6 is. So I actually think if you guys have ever had the 2, the 6 will absolutely not disappoint. If anything, it probably is going to make you realize the 2 was not as good as you thought it was.
So I'm okay with that because personally, like, here's what I think. Taking the context away from whiskey can be really, really helpful.
What do you mean by that?
So, blind tastings.
Okay.
Right? You don't know the age, you don't know, you're just sort of going into it blind. I think that makes total sense. Nonetheless, there is a emotional component to drinking whiskey.
For sure.
I remember the pour that I drank the morning of my wedding. Right? I remember.
What did you have?
Rosebank 21.
Rosebank?
Yeah.
I've never had that before.
OB.
Oh, okay.
Official bottling Rosebank 21. I poured I poured the 92. It's an amazing pour, and I can taste it right now.
Yeah.
Is that the best whiskey I've ever had? It feels like it, but maybe not.
Makes
right?
sense.
Like, if I chased it, if you poured it for me blind, I might not even recognize it. You know what I mean? Like, I have such a emotional connection to that. I doubt anybody has that intense of an emotional connection drinking batch 2, right? But nonetheless, the context still matters, where you're like, oh, this is really interesting. This is a brand I found. This is something I'm intrigued by, and it's really exciting. And so you remember it that way.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to not remember it that way, but the truth is, like, we're getting better at blending.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
And of course you are. Yeah, and there's so much Canadian out there. Like, you are probably sourcing better stuff because your name is growing and et cetera, et cetera. At the beginning, they probably like, okay, well, you have a checkbook, so we'll give you something. Now they're like, okay, you have a checkbook and a reputation. So, for me, by the way, that same kind of concept is Angel's Envy, which is funny because Angel's Envy is almost, what's the word? Like, indisputably, it's a good whiskey, right? Like, it tastes delicious, it's port finish, it's whatever. But I had that at my bachelor party, And so at my bachelor party, my dad had told all of my friends, "Hey, don't bring anything. Like, don't worry about it. We've got everything, but bring Bill like a bottle of whiskey. Like, he really seems to be enjoying whiskey." And I hadn't actually started the channel at that point, things were written in the stars, right? So my buddy John brought me a bottle of Angel's Envy. In the off chance he ever sees this, thanks, John. And I drank that as the first sip of the night. With a ribeye steak that my dad had cooked to absolute perfection. And the whole moment, I ate the rule was I had to eat the steak using this gigantic like Bowie knife. That was just something my brother-in-law was like, "Hey, here's your delicious steak, but like you have to eat it with a knife." And so I have a pretty funny picture of myself, just like huge steak knife. And but the Angel's Envy, it has that same kind of connotation. So in my mind, that will always be one of my favorite whiskeys, even if I've had way better. Which actually is hard to pick out a bourbon that's port finished that is significantly better. I can't even think of one off the top of my head.
Port is one of the most fun finishing casks. I'll say that.
Yeah. It has so much flavor.
It has so much flavor. But it also, particularly with rye, it just, if you think about rye and what rye is bringing to the table, and it's bringing that kind of that heavy spice note, and usually a little associated astringency, which is kind of the other edge of the sword with rye. Port brings a little bit of fruit, actually sometimes a lot of bit of fruit, chocolate, and sweetness. And it's just like,
how do you not win with that?
How does that not win
it's
with
like easy
something
mode.
that's got a nice
So,
yeah.
Actually, just thinking about it, and chat, help us out here. Have there been any like corn whiskeys finished in port? Like, obviously there's bourbon finished with port because I just talked about it, but I'm just thinking, like, to our conversation earlier where corn is kind of like chicken. Like, if you just had the body of a corn whiskey finished in the flavor of a port, that I have no idea if that would be good or not. Honestly, it could be terrible. But if anybody was going to do it, I would think Balcones might do it.
Or us.
Or you guys. Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even... Did I just totally... Yeah, I just glossed
I don't know.
that.
Maybe we're doing something like that. Maybe we aren't.
I'm thinking 100% corn. But still, yes,
That's funny.
Maybe.
That's really funny.
I promise I didn't remember that. All right, so let's see what's going on in the chat here. So, Scotland allows you to do something similar. They just pretend they're not 8 liters of sherry soaked into that cask. Yeah, I've heard that quite a few times.
Yep.
Navi, I don't know. Sugar Kitty's a he. Okay.
Apologies, Sugar Kitty.
All right.
Shouldn't have made an assumption.
2 gallons of... All right, so I saw a dude on YouTube get 2 nearly 3 gallons of whiskey from a barrel he bought to make a cabinet. Interesting. So he just was gonna make a cabinet. He like decided to soak the.
Actually, yeah. If you
not?
think about it, like people are trying to, the distilleries are constantly trying to unload barrels if they've used them multiple times, and
It does make sense.
there's like nothing you can do with it.
Yeah.
You can sell it as planters. You can sell it however you want.
I have a barrel
and
in
you're
my
like,
garage.
right, exactly, right. And you're like,
So-
okay, well, I'm gonna make a cabinet out of it, and it's like, well, it's actually still got some whiskey left.
Jason, I do kind of agree with you in a way about the Angel's Envy being almost whiskey, but no, it's still water. I want really bad to try their cast strength versions that they release every year. I just have never seen them in the wild, and I don't have a connection there. So we'll see. For the moment, I like it. Waiting for True North port finished. Okay. All right. So let's see if we have any questions for Nick here. Nothing coming through. But if you guys have any questions for Nick, obviously he's very knowledgeable. Feel free to ask in the chat. We'll just check it out there. So AE cast strength is definitely better than the regular, but that's not a terribly high bar to get over. Oof. All right, I guess maybe it is nostalgia for me. Oh well. I'm still gonna like. Oh, you know what? Actually, this is interesting. So the 06, I have nothing but like the little tiny bit in the bottom of the Glencairn, and I just nosed it as I always do before I sip. It tastes like sawing into oak wood. Sorry, I said taste. It smells like oak. I mean, nothing but oak, but like oak sawdust, which is weird because it didn't smell like that when they were stuffing the glass. But that's another thing that I've come to start doing when I film at nighttime. A lot of times I'll do my video and then I'll edit and then I just go upstairs and go to sleep because it's like 3:00 in the morning, right?
And then you leave it over.
I leave it over,
Yeah,
and then in the morning it smells so good in this office. It just smells like what a gentleman's man cave should smell like leather and like mahogany, and it's like oak whiskey just kind of permeating the air. This is what this smells like. This actually smells like what I want a wood shop to smell like. Plus a little sugar. But that's truly with nothing. Well, you have a bunch of left in there. This is
I know. I'm trying to decide if I can taste it with that, if I can nose it with the actual liquid in the glass.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about that is like a lot of times people ask if whiskey oxidizes, right?
Right.
So you get that all the time. Does whiskey oxidize in the bottle?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no. Mm-hmm. It's not oxidizing. It's too stable for oxidation. However, you get evaporation, right? And whenever I say that, you get the kind of like, wait a second. What do you mean it's evaporating? Well, it's actually evaporating into the headspace. The lighter compounds are evaporating in the headspace.
Every time you open it, it's gone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice evidence of that.
Yes,
right?
For sure.
And you're like, oh my God, okay. So everything that you're smelling when you're coming into your office, by the way, is everything you're losing.
Yes, right.
So it's pretty cool.
Interesting experiment. I should just open every single bottle and just leave the corks on the table and then just go away for the night. It would smell incredible, but all of my whiskey would be ruined. So not worth
actually,
it.
There are a handful of whiskeys. There are a handful of whiskeys that I actually used to really prefer opening the bottle, pouring out like down to the shoulder where these are, and leaving it open overnight. Craigellachie was always
that one I could absolutely see.
It's just rough around the edges in the first pour, and if you open it, pour a little, and leave it, it just absolutely blossoms. I think it gets a lot better. It's really interesting.
Craigellachie was where I learned about the concept of worm tubs.
I know, right?
Yeah, and then like that sulfur flavor or whatever. But that was exactly what I tasted the first time I tried it, and it was. It's funny, we were talking about all these extremely old videos. That was video number like 6 or 7 for me. I'm on probably like 250, something like that. It just countless. And it's funny, 'cause that one actually still sticks out to me. I can remember what that tastes like just by the name. I could see that helping a lot.
Totally.
Yeah. Let's see. So when I seriously started on whiskey, the Angel's Envy was something I really liked. The more I found, really good whiskey. So interesting thing about Angel's Envy too. I was on there was like a local. It was during the pandemic. Our local library was doing a bunch of classes online, and one of them was how to make cocktails, like very common cocktails, and one of them was specifically whiskey cocktails. So they did a Zoom call, and they were like, "This is how you make a Manhattan," and this is how you make an old fashioned. And they said, go get whatever bourbon you have. And so I took out the Angel's Envy just because I was trying to like show off a little bit.
Yeah.
And the lady was like, well, I mean, you could use Angel's Envy. It'd be a bit of a waste. I was like, oh, it's just what I had laying around. I was like such a douche about it. And after the call was over, she actually stayed on and we talked whiskey for a little bit.
That's funny. I think I was a total like anti-cocktail person.
Yeah.
Really early on with whiskey.
I was just like,
why? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? And when we first started working with Sammy, who's blends with me and Zach, he was a really serious mixologist, and we bought him a bottle of like really expensive vintage gin.
Okay.
Like 60s gin, you know what I mean? And we bought it was like $350 because it's not because it was, it was probably like $6 or whatever it costs when they, you know what I mean?
You can't find 60.
Can't find it anymore, right? And it was cool, and I looked it up, and it was really cool. And so I buy it for him, and he goes to open it, and he's like, "What do you want me to mix up?"
Right.
And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, what the hell did you think I was going to do with it?"
Like few people sip gin.
Yeah, so right? And he made this incredible cocktail, and it really like tweaked my mind a little bit about using nicer
Yeah.
whiskeys with cocktails.
Oh, for sure.
Oh man, and that was a game changer for me. That was
For
really a game changer for me.
100%. And I'm totally with you. Like, it's the same concept with cooking, right? Like, you don't use crap sherry when you're
Right,
cooking,
right,
unless
right.
sometimes you do. Like, you buy the stuff from the store, but if you can use good stuff, you should. If you can't, if you don't, what is it? If you don't want to drink it, then you shouldn't cook
Then
with
you
it.
shouldn't cook with it.
So here's a question that you're gonna hate.
Oh, I like
So-
questions I hate.
If I had to make a cocktail with your stuff, which by the way,
I've done.
despite what I just said, I actually feel would be awful. Like, it would be sacrilege.
You're pretty
Is-
fun.
is-
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe. So I'm trying to think of like what I would even want to use. I'd probably use one of your ryes to make like a Manhattan or something. But
I've made so I actually like have made and really enjoy making Manhattans with batch one,
batch one,
which
Okay.
is
let me just reach over here
A
and
little-
grab batch one
a
because I'm
little
totally
messed
prepared.
up because like you can't find it anymore. We only made 1,300 bottles of it, and you're
Yeah.
gonna make a Manhattan with it.
I have
but
bottle
of course I
602.
tried,
Yes.
and it makes an incredible Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
I think relatively obviously, but basically the really heavy spice of that
Yep.
with Antica, just like it works. It's
Yeah.
really
Is
quite a
that
bit
the
of
proper
fun.
way to say that, by the way?
What?
Antica?
I think so.
Okay, I always said Antiqua. So because I'm like,
I'm pretty sure it's Antica.
okay, because I'm trashy and I'm like from yeah, I'm from
Hey,
South
I'm from-
Massachusetts. I'm from Southern Massachusetts, so I'm a lot closer to Rhode Island than I am Boston.
Oh, that's funny.
I grew up in Rainham. If
No,
you have
so-
any idea where that is. So-
Perfect. Yeah. So you know, I think I've made Manhattans with that.
Yeah. Antica.
I've made red hooks which is like
What's in a red hook?
okay, Luxardo,
Yeah.
and Punta Mez.
Okay.
So you do like an ounce and a half of usually either probably like a batch 4.
Mhm.
Because batch 4 has just such a rich molasses note and it has a lot of rye character in it.
Okay.
Because really you usually would do a red hook with a rye.
Yeah.
So I do 2 ounces and then I do half ounces maraschino Luxardo and a half ounce of Punta Mez.
Mhm.
Just stir it on ice over a rocks glass with one big fat ice cube.
Okay.
Ridiculous.
Nice.
Really good.
That sounds good. I actually have never even considered putting your stuff into a cocktail.
It's fun.
Which, is not a bad idea.
It's got good proof. It's
Yeah.
got really definitive flavors. So the fact that you're using it
Mhm.
comes through. You know, the thing is like
Yeah.
if you use like an expensive but not really pronounced whiskey,
Mhm.
you're really wasting your money
Yeah,
when
that-
you're
and
making
that
a
makes sense.
cocktail. It has to.
Yeah.
You have to really enjoy cocktails, and you have to be able to notice the difference
Mm-hmm.
for it to really be worth it to use anything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd rather make a Manhattan with a Rittenhouse if I'm thinking about Manhattans. But if I'm like, I'm gonna make a really good cocktail, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna obsess over this cocktail,
Yep.
then it's worth it sometimes.
I love using my Pikes Creek for the for Manhattans. Like that's probably my go-to. But I will make a Manhattan out of anything. But almost whenever I make it with bourbons, it's kind of like what you said. It's almost like not. It's just adding alcohol to a tasty drink.
So the time
Yeah.
I use our whiskeys
Yeah.
is when I'm playing Whiskey Assassins.
Okay.
Do you know Whiskey Assassins?
Oh, why does that sound familiar?
Okay, Whiskey Assassins is like when we were just talking about it. If
Okay.
you have a bottle that
Oh,
you
okay.
leave like 2 inches in,
Mhm.
it's not a good pour anymore.
Right.
Makes a phenomenal cocktail.
Mhm.
And so like I've had leftover bottles of batch 1 or something like
Mhm.
that where I used it as a sample bottle at a tasting and I forgot about it because I brought it home and I put it in the basement and then I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? You know what I mean? It's like Manhattan, right?
Right.
And,
Makes sense.
and so Whiskey Assassins is a great
That's all right.
Whiskey Assassins is a great game to experiment with some cool stuff.
There's a term, and I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's like a wounded gazelle.
Wounded
Yeah.
Gazelle.
So the Scotch
yeah.
4 dummies, like I want to say like 6-7 years ago at this point, they coined that term. Because I would always say, oh, it's like a bottle kill, and they're like, oh, like a wounded gazelle, like it's easy to catch and you just kill it off. I'm like, okay,
Wounded gazelle.
sure, why not?
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So a couple of things. So I've gotten this question a couple of times in the chat. Wounded zebras, yeah, same idea. That too. We'll get to something cool in a minute here. I saw a couple people saying that they can't get your stuff like in Oregon. Like, where are you available?
Oh, we're available.
You are.
We're
Okay,
actually
so-
available in stores in Oregon.
Perfect. All right. So if they can't find you in stores, they can get you from your website.
You can get us from our website,
which you guys can find in the description, by the way.
and-
I linked to both Bottle 5 and Bottle 6.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You also can often find our whiskeys, though 3 and 6 I think just sold out on Sealbox and Shared Pour.
Nice. All right.
But I think they have like a case or so of 5 left
Mm-hmm.
lying around, but we'll probably send them a little bit more, 5 and 6.
Okay.
But Sealbox and Shared Pour often will so like there are effectively like 41 states that you can really easily ship to,
Okay.
and then there are the
Other ones.
other ones.
Yeah.
And so like
And Illinois.
Illinois, you got to go to Vinny's. but for some of the other ones where our third party ecom partner that we use, because we don't have the license to actually sell it, so we use like a somebody fulfills it for us.
Mm-hmm.
They often Sealbox and Shared Pour often will cover states that we can't cover.
Okay.
And then we also have a store locator. So
Okay,
Oregon.
perfect.
There's a great store in Oregon, and of course I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but they've been supporting us from day one.
Okay.
It was really funny. We've had, and this should be really obvious to us, but a bunch of northern states like Minnesota and Wisconsin and Oregon and
Arkansas?
Washington, Arkansas.
Do you know?
No.
Looks like Charles. Charles is.
I don't know off the top of my head,
Yeah.
Charles. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hey, Charles, if you're really interested and you can make it worth my while, we could figure that out.
Yeah, but the northern states
Mm-hmm.
shockingly all reached out to us and wanted Found North.
Fantastic. Yeah. Right.
Crazy, right? Totally nuts.
This is a total non sequitur. Somebody asked me to ask you this earlier.
Okay, I'm interested.
Do you believe in aliens?
Ooh, yes.
Yes.
Totally.
Perfect.
Hard yes.
Because you can't not, right? There's like a quadrillion planets out there.
There,
Like,
mathematically speaking, like,
it would be ridiculous
it'd be
life
weird if
didn't
they
exist.
didn't exist. Also, we're aliens. Like,
So,
I always
in
think
a lot
about
of
that.
ways.
I'm always just like, we're like very strange. And when you think about, oh man, how are we doing?
I know
the
that.
alien
Like
question?
I said, it was a non sequitur, right?
So I love, I really love, those National Geographic and those types of, like, Deep Blue,
Mhm.
where they go down and they film,
Oh yeah.
like, the creatures
And they're
at
just so
20,000
alien,
feet.
yeah.
Those are aliens. Like, they're aliens from this planet. But those are aliens.
Right,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? And it's like,
Like a cuttlefish is an alien.
I don't even know. So, do I
So-
think there's a high probability that life formed on a different planet somewhere out there
Oh yeah.
in the gigantic existence that is the universe?
Mhm.
Yes, I think probably.
Yeah.
Zach's gonna be like, why did we lose so many subscribers last night? It's like,
Aliens.
right.
Right.
You came out and said you believe in aliens,
Yeah.
and now no one takes you
Is,
seriously.
is that contentious? I don't think that's
I don't
contentious.
think-
I don't think
I don't
anybody
know.
that has thought about it for more than a few seconds, or thinks that we're not like heliocentric, is or actually heliocentric probably not so much, but Earth whatever.
Whatever.
Um,
I get what you're saying.
Of course, aliens exist. Of course, have they been here? That's a little tougher to say, but
Whether they've been here or not, I
yeah.
have no idea.
I don't know.
Um,
There's a lot of evidence that would make me think that they probably have been, but also like I don't necessarily.
I don't know.
It's not an area that I've spent a lot of time.
I haven't thought about it enough. I will say this. I do want to go all the way back to the beginning and answer the question from Zach. The second question.
I don't believe
the
you.
second piece of the question
Yes.
was how much do whiskeys you've had in the past influence the decisions made.
Okay.
So basically, like, how much has whiskey I've had in the past affected whiskeys that we make now? I wouldn't say there are whiskeys where I'm like, this particular whiskey is the one that I want to make.
Mhm.
I will say the really interesting thing about Found North, and I think our company in general, is weirdly enough, not very many customer-facing people in the industry go on to start whiskey brands.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? Like, it's
Yeah.
often people who've started on the production side or started on the supply side or have a vision. And, a guy like Perkins, who started High West,
Mhm.
just a chemist who had a vision for a whiskey distillery and started High West, right?
Right.
Like, it's not a guy who spent 10 years working in retail, you know what I mean? And so very infrequently do we have people in this industry who started in a really heavily customer-facing role who go on to start whiskey brands.
That makes sense.
Um,
It's a very different mindset.
it's a different mindset.
Like I'm an engineer, I've got my degree in computer science, and like the fact that I can even look people in the eye and talk to them is a rarity, and has helped me to now become a director at this. Like
there you go.
It's ridiculous. Like it's such a split
It's
of
a split.
salespeople and engineers.
And sometimes when
Yeah.
you meet
Yeah.
blenders and distillers, you're literally like, okay.
Yeah.
But so for us, what's really interesting is our entire team had anywhere from 3 to like 15 years of customer facing experience as brand ambassadors, spirits buyers, bartenders, right? So
Okay.
basically, like, we are the folks who tried an incredibly large number of whiskeys and were responsible for selling them.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, bartenders is a great call out. They're a really good middle ground between
They're
both.
really
Because they
good
can
middle
do
ground.
all the crazy stuff and still talk to you
and
have
still
something
talk to you,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
They have to,
Yeah.
and right, there's
Yeah.
exactly.
That's a good span. Yeah.
And so for us, we actually had a really keen sense of what we liked and what style of whiskey we were trying to make. And the hard part was filling in the rest, which was like, we need to figure out how to blend it to make it work. But it's easier
Minor
when you,
detail.
Yeah, minor detail. But it is actually easier when you start at an ending point where you have a sense of what you like. And so the answer to that question is effectively we weren't sitting there going, we love whiskey X, we're gonna make whiskey X, or this tastes like, some whiskey we love, therefore we're gonna make it. But we did have a very keen sense of what we like and what we don't like in whiskey. You
Okay.
go back to asking, why does Canadian whiskey have this flavor and ours doesn't? We don't like that flavor, period, right? And
Perfect.
it's very much a process of, we've tasted as a collective team thousands and thousands and thousands of whiskeys, and been forced to think about that aspect. And I guess the last bit would be the customers who drink whiskey have a much, much bigger influence on how whiskey is made than customers think.
Okay.
The industry
Because
is
what you buy is what people would target. That makes sense.
totally,
Yeah, of course.
and we're not afraid of that. Like when we get feedback on our whiskeys, we think about that as we're making our next whiskeys.
Yeah.
We don't sit there just being like, oh, we want to make something that's just this arbitrary creative expression.
Yeah.
We want to make something that people like.
So I'm going to stop you there for a sec. So with the 246,
Yeah.
that is very clearly a development of your ability to create something similar better each time. Well, 4 is debatably not as good as 2, but it's different in other ways. But 6 is better than both. However, 1, 3, 5 is very different than 1 and 3.
Totally. And 3 is actually pretty
obviously,
different
yeah.
from 1. Those ryes are not actually that similar.
Let me just grab 3 off the shelf here. No big deal. All right, so 3 was 64 rye, 32 corn, 4 barley.
66-34 was the batch 1.
66-30. Okay, so you did adjust there. Now with 5,
But it was more about how we actually,
so I do notice you changed the label up a little bit. So
because of the wheat.
right, I like that you did. The part of my brain that loves that, like even with the Johnny Walkers, like I had to have all of them because they were all.
Oh,
Like I
that was not what
I
we were thinking,
love
but
that.
I like that.
Totally, but like I have to have the different.
We just
I love
wanted a
it.
cue, right? Where
I
it's like
did.
a visual cue.
Exactly.
This
yeah.
is something we haven't made before. Different color.
I love that. Like if you guys, almost like Octomore, if you would have done batch like 1.1 or
God.
1.7 just to
We
show
thought
them what.
about- we
Oh my
thought
god.
about that stuff. Anyway,
Awesome.
continue.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I love that you're doing different stuff. So actually, I'm gonna derail my own question here. And what haven't you guys tried that you want to try? Like you've done an American whiskey, you've done rye, you've done wheat.
No, we've done no American whiskey. Nothing we've made is American whiskey. We have something that's in American oak.
Oh, I'm sorry. For some reason I always
No,
think of
it's
that as
fine. Yeah,
American.
Yeah.
It says cast strength, but it's like. Anyway, sorry.
What
So,
else do we want to do?
What else do you want to do?
Yeah, so I think for us, the vision is the vision's pretty big in the sense that I'm obsessed with whiskey history. Obsessed, obviously, right?
Yeah.
You talk to me, I like, and I think for us, we tend to be way more attuned to what's going on with other brands, which I didn't prove with my Pikesville ignorance. But
yeah, that was me. I prompted it, and you disagreed with me.
No.
So,
but we tend to be very aware of whiskey history. We tend to be really interested in what other brands are doing. But our feelings about whiskey history and the reason I love it so much is I love the idea that there have been these effectively like these linchpin moments where certain changes in production caused by a brand or caused by a stylistic choice by a producer really truly alter how whiskey is made and what we're drinking today.
Yeah.
So like what we're drinking today is actually truly very much influenced by whiskey brands and whiskey producers and whiskey consumers from hundreds of years ago. That's cool. I think that's like maybe one of the most interesting aspects of whiskey. And so you would think, well, okay, so what you really want to do is adhere to tradition. No, quite the opposite.
I wouldn't think that. Yeah.
What's really cool
Learn from
is
tradition.
These moments where people have like completely changed the face of whiskey by presenting something in a new way, by transitioning how brands, producers, and consumers are approaching whiskey. For us, one of the reasons we don't do as much Canadian rye, just straight Canadian rye anymore, is because people have already done it. And it's not drastically changing the way that people think about Canadian whiskey.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I think our corn whiskeys do that. And so for us, what we really want to do from a big picture standpoint is change the narrative, change the perception of Canadian whiskey for the consumers, but also perhaps to cause the producers to change themselves. If Found North is as popular as we want it to be, which is down the road,
and that's always going to be a moving target.
Right, it's always going to be a moving target. But you can imagine Canadian producers being like, maybe we should, I don't know, take a page out of their book and do something a little differently.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if we can do that and we can have consumers coming back and going, maybe we should give Canadian a second chance.
Yeah.
That's really cool. We think that's really cool. And so for us, we're actually constantly trying to, one, push what we're doing next and make sure we're not making the same whiskey again, even if 2, 4, and 6 have some fine tuning aspect of them.
Yeah.
We're actually really hoping that our next whiskey is always our best whiskey.
That makes sense.
And so from what we're actually going to do, control more of the production. Does that eventually mean distilling? Maybe, but that's way down the road.
Yeah.
But
it's also a whole different industry.
It's a different,
or not industry, but it's a whole different thing. Yeah.
It's a different aspect of it. Yeah. So for us, I think like the process of, okay, at first we were blending. Well, now what we've actually started doing is buying the components and recasting them and maturing them ourselves.
Okay.
And then on top of it, what we've started doing is making blends and then further maturing those blends. Right? So not just making a blend and it's done, but making a blend with the intent of we can actually continue to tweak this and enhance it and change it by recasting it and changing the maturation profile.
So you make me there's so all right, so we got to get to this because I totally want to. So let's grab another glass here. You should have a couple clean ones. So
I do.
We have a why don't you tell us about this guy?
All right.
Well, actually, sorry, because I was planning on segueing and it's interesting enough. So if you guys remember last week I did a stream where I tasted a bunch of Starward whiskeys and I was picking my next single barrel. So there were 2 of them that I narrowed it down to, and I did end up picking one of them. But I didn't tell Nick what they were. And I ended up giving him those 2, and I said, let me know which one of these 2 you think is better. Now, Nick, like, undisputably has a better taste for whiskey than I do. He's going to pretend that he, whatever, but he does. And he picked the same one I did, which is really, really reaffirming. So that'll come soon. I actually just let the distillery know today which one I picked. Probably about 3 hours before he told me which one he liked, so it was perfect. I wish I would have waited, actually. That would have made me feel a lot better about the investment, but still. So you brought another single barrel that we are going to try tonight, and I know nothing about it, still sealed, as you can see. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so...
I'll pop it open.
Funny, please. Right, it's funny to think of a blending company that's like,
I know, right?
Right, we're sourcing whiskey. We believe in blending wholeheartedly, and we're gonna make a single barrel, right? It's like, well, right? What the hell?
Pause.
Pause.
Ooh, that was the best one of the night.
That was the best one of the night.
I
You're fine.
I'm still-
You should. After all of the times that I've actually consumed the whiskey before we've actually cheersed, I think it'd be okay if you poured yourself first.
I will say so far I am 3 for 3 of remembering you, but half points on each for not thinking about it till I'm about to pour. So
So basically, for us,
Yeah.
we want a single barrel program because I think the coolest there are two really fun aspects of single barrel programs in my mind. One is the truly like ephemeral nature of it, right? It is, you want to talk about like a one of one. There's one barrel of it, period. The second aspect is I feel like single barrels are a good way to get people closer to the production process
makes sense.
and closer to this is my palate. This
That's
is what
totally why
want,
I do it.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's why it's awesome.
Mhm.
And so for us, we were like, okay, we really want a single barrel program, but we want to continue to adhere to being blenders and being really invested in that. So what we did was we made a blend. The blend was 12-year-old rye, 19-year-old rye, and 21-year corn
Okay.
at a 50-20-30 ratio, by the way. So 50% 12-year-old rye,
Mhm.
20% 19-year-old rye, 30% 21-year-old corn.
Okay.
We made that blend in December of 2021. We let it marry, and then we recast it into a bunch of different barrel types.
Oh, okay.
And those barrels became our single barrel program.
Okay. That makes sense.
What's fun about that is, one, we didn't just pull a barrel out of something we already make. You know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, you make the such whiskey 10-year and just like, we're going to just snag a barrel.
Right.
You know,
and then
it's
you
like,
can rebrand it.
and then you
whatever
can
else.
kinda,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
buy something that tastes relatively close to it
Yep.
on the shelf. With ours, it doesn't exist anywhere else, right?
Yep.
So if somebody picks a barrel from us, or if we sell a single barrel like we're going to do with this one,
Mhm.
it's really, really very much a one-of-one expression, which
Okay.
is fun.
That makes sense. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Really caramel, but also.
We should say what it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
This was a Pedro Jimenez sherry, but
Oh okay. Yeah. But it's interesting. Hold on. I know you're sipping, and that's fine. It's actually, yeah, that caramel is turning into something else, which is the PX sherry.
yes.
Yeah. It's like, all right. Let me just try a sip. Cheers.
Go, please. Cheers.
Very smooth, like impossibly smooth. Wow.
Ridiculous.
Oh wow, that finish. Okay, there's the PX.
PX is on the finish. It's crazy.
Okay. Cherries like all day. What else? Like a hint of plum, but there's something else going on there that I'm not. Wow, the finish is still happening.
I know.
It's evolving now into like almost like a what are those cherry cough drops that are basically just candy but not really? Were they Ludens? Was that the
Halls?
No, not Halls. No, that's a whole different taste. I think it was Ludens. It was like what you wanted when you were sick as a kid because it was basically eating
'cause
candy.
you're eating candy.
Yeah. To like the strawberry insert of those like strawberry candies.
Okay, so I get big strawberry jam on
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Oh yeah, strawberry jam's that's a way better way of putting it.
I get strawberry jam, and I get the like, and I get this with sherry cask scotch,
Yeah.
but it's manifesting differently.
It's still there.
I get the like heavy filling of the Fig Newton.
This might be one of the longest finishes I've ever had
Thank you.
in a whiskey.
Yes, that is.
Clarification. Ludens was essentially candy, yes, of course. 70% rye and PX sherry. Wow, yeah. This is super cool.
So
66% rye. But
so
yeah,
there's barley component in the rye we were using.
Yep.
So it
Oh,
ended
okay,
up being 66% rye, 30% corn, 4% malted barley. Again, not really intentional, but that ratio, so we seem to have a type because
Mhm.
that's batch one's grain ratio as well.
Okay. Oh, I like this a lot.
This is a fun whiskey.
Damn it. I like this a lot.
Okay, so this whiskey,
Oh.
this is going to be our next single barrel release that we do only through our mailing list.
Okay.
So we did the first one last September now.
Mm-hmm. That's I have that somewhere around here.
Is that it?
Yep, there it is.
Oh God.
Yep. So that's mostly gone, 75% gone, something like that.
We didn't send whole bottles to very many people. Just
Yeah.
in
Oh, I
case
got
you're
a
wondering.
whole bottle. Yeah.
Seeing that we made like 200 bottles of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember the number. Yes, this is oh, you didn't have the barrel number on it. I was gonna say I have.
Oh, you also get the sexy trade sample thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that's
Not
pretty
for
cool.
retail sale.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I'm very
No,
special.
this is really fun. So basically, we sent out the link,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, we sent out the email. It's like, we're gonna send out the link to buy it on this day at this time.
I remember you doing that because I remember thinking that was very cool of you, because it gave everybody an actual opportunity to get it.
It gives everybody an opportunity to get it.
Yeah.
But I also love the idea that the reason we did it was we love the idea. I hate the super allocated thing that's going on in whiskey right now. It's not my favorite thing. And we really are trying to lean away from that. But at the same time, like, you want to do special editions, and a lot of times they're single barrels, they're individual whiskeys, they're something, you know what I mean? And so for us, we're like, how do we reward the people who've been following Found North?
Makes sense.
And that's how we did
And
it.
that's how you do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Cool. This is delicious. I'm again a little sad that we ended on this because I would have loved to have tried this with like right
With a
after the
clean
wheat.
palate. I
Yeah,
know,
or
I
actually
know.
even I love the wheat as a starter whiskey for the night.
It was a great pick for starter
It
whiskey for
was.
the night.
That was
The hard-
really, really good.
I would say the thing I'm like, one of the things there's two things I'm really proud of with our whiskeys.
Mhm.
One is I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Which is that people aren't like, oh great, yeah, okay, next really. They're like, ah shit, I wish I had tasted this with like a really fresh palate.
Yeah.
Which is good because that means you're gonna want to taste it
Right.
tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's great.
And like if it tastes this good after having 7 whiskeys, holy crap. Like I'm very excited to try this tomorrow.
So,
Yeah.
and the other aspect is when we do tastings,
Mhm.
we've done tastings with all 6 batches.
Mm.
I did a tasting a couple weeks ago with all 6 batches and 2 of our single barrels,
Yeah.
and we had 40 people there. And at the end, the hosts started asking what everybody's favorite whiskey was.
Yep.
And it was just there were hands raised for every single whiskey.
Awesome.
And that's cool, right?
That
'Cause
makes
it's like
sense,
you're
but
making
it's
enough
speaking to everybody.
variation, but you're like speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we've been really proud of, and I'm delighted you like this one because I think this is really fun. And
I couldn't
different for
imagine a
us.
person not liking that. Like, I don't want to meet the person who doesn't like this whiskey. I mean, they're probably not very interesting. So, all right. So we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon. But if anybody has any questions for Nick, like obviously he's a treasure trove of knowledge. But throw it in there. Charles has a really good point. If it's punching through after the others, this thing must be great. And
Oh, thank you.
I wish I could properly articulate how good this whiskey is. Most of you will know how much I love like a sherry finished whiskey where it's just all fruit all day. This is that because of the PX, of course, but it's a lot of times, especially with Scotch or whatever, I feel like the Oloroso or the sherry is a complement to what it already tasted like. This one feels like it's all about that. And it's almost like being, so what is it, 30% corn and 4% barley. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's because of the lower barley point.
That
I'm trying to think of what makes this taste so good. Is it the rye or the PX complementing the rye because it's not
PX
a thing I've had
complementing the
100 times.
yeah, and I see
You know?
Steve asked, is it PX then Scotch then this barrel? No, it's PX then this barrel.
Okay.
This never had Scotch in or anything like that.
Hmm.
So for us, this is the reason this works is because the reason this works, frankly, is because of the blend we made. The blend we made beforehand was not a complete whiskey.
Okay.
We left space for wood.
Okay.
Right, there was an intentionality. God damn! You know what's funny is I was like really trying to dodge over.
Right, of course.
This.
There's no
I know,
way not
there's
to,
just
yeah.
no way in
There's
this
no way.
industry to get away from this.
Not at all.
Who cares, right? It's fun.
So plenty of space for wood.
plenty,
Just cavernous. That was awesome.
No,
We're not recovering
Oh,
from
God,
that.
we're not. No, Lumsden's gonna watch this and smile. If anybody's ever been to a Bill Lumsden tasting,
Mhm.
they'll know what I'm talking about.
I
that
have,
dude
actually,
has
yeah.
the dirtiest mouth I've ever. Every single joke is like, no. The cool thing about this was making the blend with room space, cavernous space for wood maturation.
Okay.
Because a lot of times what we're seeing is someone will take effectively like a done whiskey,
Mhm.
but they're trying to sex it up, right?
Yep.
So they'll like put it into something. And the problem is like there's only so much space for tannin, for wood sweetness, for those things. And so for us, we actually tried to make this not be a complete whiskey to really need the last component, the last wood component to actually work.
I like that mentality. That
And
makes
it
a lot of
was
sense.
but
But you're banking on.
you're banking on
Yeah.
it working, which
Yeah.
we were nervous about.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Especially doing all the different cast types.
Mhm.
Because we're just like, all right, cool, this might work for sherry, but is it going to work for sauternes?
Yeah.
For sauternes.
Nice.
Yeah, it still works, but it was really interesting. It was really fun.
What is the ABV on this? Because it's kind of just.
Do you want to guess?
I do. It's close to 60, but I feel like I'm gonna guess just a hint under 60.
Wow, it's right on the money. 58.9.
That's better than I would have expected.
It's really good.
I have a tendency to overestimate.
Mm.
I've noticed that pretty much all the time because I often drink cast strength whiskey, and so it throws off my meter of what lower stuff is. So I'm impressed I got that close. It could have easily have been 110.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
Nick,
What other casts did you do?
Yeah, okay. We did 5 different types of new wood, American oak. So different char levels, different length of aging. We did 2 different Calvados casks.
Calvados. Sorry, that's not
Apple brandy.
Okay, all right.
Really delicious.
That would explain why I'm not as familiar.
We did sauternes.
Mhm.
We did a tawny port. We did a ruby port.
Both good. Yeah.
Ruby port was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then we did a sherry barrel and a sherry butt.
Okay.
Sherry barrel went to Binny's. This is a sherry butt.
Mhm.
Quite different, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, we also had to age because the sherry butt's so much bigger. You have to age it longer.
Mhm.
So we did the sherry butt for a year, and the sherry barrel was like I can't remember, 7 months, something like that.
Okay.
So it just matured differently. We did 2 different Muscat barrels.
Mhm.
This wine cask effectively.
Yep.
We did a cognac, which was really good.
Mhm.
Cognac was really good. I don't know. Have I said 18 yet?
It's a lot. Either way, yeah.
We're doing a really cool.
Yeah.
We're doing a really cool one with Julios
Yep.
that we're working on right now,
Nice.
where we kept it in ex bourbon for a year. So we basically just like put it into ex bourbon and left it for a year, and now we're actually going to put it in another finishing cask that he wants to do because it's Julios. And
Yeah.
Ryan says I want to do this, and we're just like, okay, sure.
Ryan has a
whatever you
good
wanna do.
friggin' sense, though.
He has a great sense.
And I would just
if he
do
does
whatever
it-
he
I know.
says.
We were just like, what do you want to do? And he was like, this is what I want to do. We were like, all right,
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, I think. We did an Ardbeg cask. That was the Gordon's one. Yeah,
Yes.
that Isla cask is awesome.
Oh, I bet. I just love Ardbeg. It's probably what do we got?
Did not see it at Binny's today. Wow, I can't imagine it's sold out at Binny's. I'm also doing. Sorry, Dave.
Mhm.
Dave asked is batch 6 available now. Did not see it at Binny's today. Dave, I'm gonna be in Binny's in 2 weeks. The week of like March 23rd. I'm doing seminars 2 nights, and my brother's doing tasting 3 nights at different places. I think they're about to publish it on their website, so they will have batch 6 because I'm pouring batch 6. at
And
those
you should
events.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, that'll be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Charles, yes, the rye and Calvados is incredible. Liquor Junction did one of the picks, and New Hampshire is actually getting a rye and Calvados barrel in the coming months. It's awesome.
Nice. I go up to New Hampshire constantly, so I might have to pick one of those up too.
Yeah.
Just hearing apple brandy sounds delicious mixed with this. I love the idea of the rye playing with the apple brandy like that.
Rye rye is really uncooperative from a blending standpoint.
Mhm.
Finishes incredibly well.
Yeah.
One of the reasons this works is the same reason that rye and port works.
Okay.
Right? It's similar, but sherry's just a lot nuttier than port is.
Mhm.
But a similar idea, right? You're adding
Yeah.
sweetness, you're adding a little dark chocolate, you're adding a little bit of dried fruit. Like it rounds rye out really well.
Okay. I might have to pick your brain a little bit about which ports to try to get a better flavor for it. Because I've only personally, actually, so funny thing, when both my kids were born, we bought bottles of, one kid we bought a bottle of wine, one kid we bought a bottle of port from their birth year. And then we actually have them, they're just sitting in a fridge in our unfinished part of our basement. And that's the only thing in that little refrigerator. I actually completely forgot we even had this, which is exactly the point. And when they turn 21, we'll pop them open. So one of them is a port. I couldn't even tell you what it is, but I know nothing about it.
This is vintage.
I'll show you the bottle after the stream. Yeah.
To be frank, I didn't know much about port until my wife and I went to Porto on our honeymoon.
Oh, nice.
Which we went on our honeymoon a year after we got married. But we went to Porto.
Pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So we went to Porto last August.
Okay.
And a couple very funny aspects of that. We went to Graham's. Graham's is pretty cool, really big port producer.
Okay.
And we went in and we did the tour.
Mhm.
And I've been to like 100 and some odd distilleries.
Yeah,
and
I
I've
remember
done
even before you started all
like,
this.
Yeah,
I remember being envious of you.
When I go to distilleries, I am in like little kid in a candy shop mode.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I need to read every single plaque that they have about their history. Like, what do you mean? What am I doing? So I'm reading the things. And the tour guide comes up and he's like, the first thing he says is, he's like, please ask as many questions as you can. We go down the stairs into the first like warehouse area, and he says literally the first sentence, and I am about to blurt out a question, and my wife grabs me and just goes, "Don't you fucking ask a question." He was like, I am on my honeymoon. Yeah. We are not working. You were just going to shut up and listen.
Like, I want to spend 6 hours here
and
asking.
Like, and if you tell a single person in here you make whiskey, I will kill you and leave you. In that order. It was really funny.
She's got a good insurance, right? You don't want to leave them before you get.
Exactly. But it was funny because I like really didn't know much about port.
Yeah.
Like I liked port. The only thing I knew about port was that I liked port finished whiskey, and I really learned a lot about how they make it and the different styles. And so it was very fun to then do like a tawny port finish and a ruby port finish because they really are made.
It'd be cool to try them side by side.
I know, and it's cool to taste them and then make whiskey with them and have like a bit of a vibe.
You get that extra.
This is what this actually is.
Yeah.
This is how these two things come together and manifest.
Long before I ever started the YouTube channel, when I was living on my own, actually, I was actually living in Framingham. I used to go to the like Stop and Shop or whatever, just buy my groceries for the week, and I just had nothing but time on my hands, and I would take time to actually like smell everything. And like that was just something that always stuck out to me. Like I remember a lot of smells, and that has absolutely helped me here.
Yeah, totally.
But it's something that I've since learned like nobody else does because they're not weird. So, but it helps, like to know the smell between lemon zest and a lemon
is actually a
subtle.
Factor.
It's a significant thing.
Totally.
So yeah. All right. Anyway, you and I have and will talk the entire night, but I think it's better if we just stop the stream at some point. So let me actually just give you the floor for a minute. When's batch 7 coming out? Like, tell us what's next.
Yeah. So I just got back from Canada. We were in Canada.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no. Canada's awesome.
I'm kidding. It's probably way better than the U.S.
Really fun. It's actually really fun to visit Canada, and we get to a lot now, which is awesome. Montreal is sweet. But we were wrapping up a bunch of blends, so we created the next season of Found North Blends. So basically, like when we did this, you'll see it says season 1, and effectively that denotes the original blend, right? Because we have to make a blend every time we want to do single barrels.
Right.
So we had to create a new blend
Mhm.
And
Well, I'm glad you went over the detail about how you
Right,
do that because
exactly.
it makes way more sense
right.
now.
So
Yeah.
now those are gonna the fun, really fun thing now is buying the casks,
Mhm.
because it's like you have to buy them promptly. And it's very much a kind of quick trigger decision. So you're like, you smell the barrel, decide if we like it, buy it, bring it, right? And that's kind of a
Because the next person will buy it if you didn't.
totally,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
because you need to buy it while it's fresh,
Right.
right? So we get to sort of do that process, which is really fun.
Yeah. Sounds stressful, honestly.
We have a secret whiskey that you and I tasted
Mhm.
beforehand, which we're going to taste again now.
Yep.
That's coming out. It hasn't been named yet, but it's a really cool release. I'll leak that it's 18 years old. It's a really, really fun whiskey. And then we just finished batch 7. I don't know exactly when we're gonna time up the release sometime in the next few months. But batch 7, I think batch 7 is the best whiskey I think it's the best batch. I think it's the best whiskey we've made.
I love it. Well, I look forward to the next time.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
And we have some crazy old stuff coming out later this year that we're working on. So
Awesome.
we've been really deep in it. I seriously, two things. One, if you aren't on our mailing list, you will have no shot whatsoever at our special single barrels.
Mhm.
And two, if you're not on our mailing list, please join, because it's how we like to really communicate with people. We don't bombard your email with useless crap.
I actually don't even remember the last email I got from you guys.
We send
Yeah.
emails relatively sparingly. We may
Yeah.
pick it up this year to paint a bigger picture of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we seriously, it's like, if you have any interest in Found North, join our
Which you
mailing
should.
list. Which you can do at the bottom of our homepage, foundnorthwhiskey.com.
Yeah.
Did I cover everything? I'm definitely going to talk to Bill about doing a single barrel. We've got other things going.
I'm going to pause you there. He stumbled on my name, and I'm going to let you in on a secret here. He consistently wants to call me Dick. Because that's what he knows me as.
I refer to you. I'm like, my brother's like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I'm going on with the whiskey Dick.
Right.
My wife's like, who are you seeing tonight? I'm like, Dick. I mean, Bill.
So of course I comment that he's going out for Dick, right? Of course.
I'm going out for Dick. Yeah, my wife's wondering what I'm doing. I'm going out for Dick.
Going out for
exactly.
Dick.
That's perfect.
So, no, I think you covered everything. So, it is very likely that Nick and I are going to be working on a single barrel release pretty soon. I will shamelessly plug here and just say anybody who is a Patreon will get first crack at any sort of single barrels I do across the spectrum. But this will be a really good one.
Good.
I can't get over how good that whiskey is. Like, I hate to say it, it blows the 5 and the 6 away. Like, I've forgotten about these, and that is now my new obsession. So,
oh man. Nick and the dick pic. That's good. That's good.
Awesome. Look for Instagram later.
Perfect.
All right. So, everybody who's hung on or joined us later, whatever, either way, thank you guys for joining here on the Whiskey Dictionary with Nick from Found North. And you should absolutely look for literally any batch that he puts out. Every single one has been amazing. And the only reason that I would pick one over the other is because the others exist. They are, without a doubt, and I'm pretending he's not here for a minute, without a doubt, some of the best whiskeys I've ever tried. And I've got a lot of whiskeys on the shelf. So
good whiskeys on the shelf, man.
A lot of good ones. Actually, you're gonna pick whatever you want in a couple minutes here. So thank you, Nick, for I don't have anything left in my glasses because I've drained them all because they're delicious. But perfect. So Nick, thank you very much for joining.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.